What if I told you that the most famous spy in cinema history almost started as an American named Jimmy?
That the man who created James Bond hated the actor who made him immortal.
That one rogue film triggered a legal war that nearly shattered the franchise?
And that the latest movie didn't just end a story. It detonated a 60-year myth.
This is not just a list of facts. This is the hidden history of James Bond, and some of these sound fake, but every single one is real. Before Dr. No made the world obsessed with martinis and silenced pistols, there was a 1950 for television
Adaptation of Casino Royale where Bond was played by Barry
Nelson, and he was not British, he was American, called
Jimmy Bond, working for Combined Intelligence. Imagine an alternate
universe where James Bond had a New York accent. That almost happened, but that's just the
beginning. When Ian Fleming first saw Sean Connery cast as Bond for Dr. No,
he reportedly thought Connery was too rough,
too working class, not refined enough for the sophisticated spy he imagined. But after watching the performance,
Fleming changed his mind so dramatically that he rewrote Bond's ancestry in the novels, giving him Scottish roots as a tribute to Connery. The actor literally altered canon, and it gets stranger. In 1983,
Never Say Never Again brought Connery back in an unofficial Bond film because of a decades-long legal dispute over the rights to Thunderball. For a moment, there were two different Bonds in theaters at the same time. The official one from EON, and the renegade one backed by rival producers. Audiences were confused. The press called it a war, and the franchise looked far less invincible than it seemed. Here's where things almost collapsed. George Lazenby,
the man who replaced Connery in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, had never starred in a major film before.
He was a model. He basically bluffed his way into the audition, got the role,
delivered what many fans now call one of the most emotionally powerful Bond performances ever, and then walked
away after one movie because advisors told him the Bond image would soon be outdated in the counterculture.
1970's one decision reshaped the
future of James Bond for decades. This next one nearly destroyed everything. When Pierce Brosnan
was first offered the role in the 1980s, he had to turn it down because he was locked into the TV series Remington Steele, and when news broke that he was about to become Bond, the show's ratings suddenly exploded, forcing the network to renew it, legally trapping him and pushing producers to recast. He would wait almost a decade before finally debuting in Goldeneye,
proving how fragile casting decisions can be in a billion-dollar franchise. And then something happened no one expected. When Daniel Craig was announced as Bond, backlash was immediate and brutal. Online forums mocked his blonde hair. Tabloids attacked his appearance.
Fans claimed he wasn't traditional enough. But when Casino Royale premiered, it didn't just succeed. It reinvented James Bond for the 21st century, stripping away camp,
grounding the violence, and showing a version of Bond who bleeds,
fails,
and emotionally breaks. But Bond was never just about actors. Early entries like From Russia with Love were soaked in Cold War paranoia. James Bond functioned as cinematic reassurance that Britain still mattered on the global stage. Even as its empire faded, he wasn't just a spy, he was political fantasy wrapped in a tuxedo. And then came the unthinkable. In No Time to Die, Bond dies. Not implied, not ambiguous, but definitively killed in a missile strike for the first time in official franchise history. James Bond does not survive. This wasn't just a plot twist. It was a philosophical rupture, because Bond had always been cyclical,
reset, eternal, and suddenly
he was mortal. And if James Bond can die, what exactly survives? The man? The myth?
Or just the name? Because once you start digging into the real history behind Bond,
the story becomes far more dangerous than any mission he was ever sent on. But if you think the death of James Bond was the boldest move this franchise ever made,
think again, because some of the wildest moments in Bond history happened off screen, and they were far more dangerous than any villain. And it gets
stranger. The producers once seriously considered
casting an American as Bond in the official film series.
Not in a parody, not in a TV special, but in the real franchise. Names like Clint Eastwood were floated,
and Eastwood himself later admitted he was
approached.
He turned it down because he believed Bond should remain British. Imagine the cultural earthquake if that had happened. James Bond with a Western drawl instead of a clipped London
accent. The identity of the character could have shifted permanently. Here's something even hardcore fans miss: the iconic gun barrel sequence, the shot of Bond Turning and firing directly at the camera was inspired by real
firearm barrel photography, and in early films, it was actually done practically.
with a stuntman walking inside a massive spiral set. It wasn't just a graphic overlay. It was physical,
Mechanical,
experimental
filmmaking, and it became one of the most recognizable
openings in cinema history. But here's where things get darker. During the production of Skyfall, the franchise was under extreme financial pressure because MGM had filed for bankruptcy, meaning the future of Bond was uncertain. Production delays sagged up, and for a moment, it looked like James Bond might disappear not because of creative decisions, but because of corporate collapse. And yet Skyfall went on to become one of the highest-grossing entries in the entire series, proving that Bond thrives under pressure. And then something happened no one expected. Javier Bardem's
villain in Skyfall was one of the first Bond
antagonists openly coded with unsettling intimacy toward Bond. Their confrontation scene crackled with psychological tension in a way older films never dared attempt. It signaled that modern Bond stories were willing to explore vulnerability, identity, discomfort, instead
of just explosions and gadgets. But let's talk about
the gadgets for a second, because
they almost ruined the franchise. By the time Die Another Day hit theaters, invisible cars, CGI-heavy sequences, and exaggerated tech had pushed the tone to near parody. Critics tore it apart.
Audiences felt the excess, and many insiders later admitted that the series had drifted too far into self-caricature. That film didn't just underperform creatively. It forced a total reboot, which is why Casino Royale in 2006 feels so radically grounded. It was a survival pivot. Here's another twist. The character of M. Bond's superior
was originally written as a stern male authority figure in the novels, but when Judi Dench took over the role in Goldeneye,
she redefined the dynamic completely, turning M into a sharp, politically aware critic of Bond himself. At one point calling him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. That meta-commentary allowed the franchise to acknowledge its own outdated edges while evolving. It was self-awareness baked into canon, and it gets even more intense. Daniel Craig performed many of his own stunts across his Bond films, tearing muscles,
losing teeth,
slicing fingertips during fight scenes. During Casino Royale,
he knocked out 2 of his front teeth in a stunt rehearsal and had to have them reattached before filming continued. This wasn't the polished,
invincible Bond of the past. This was a physically punished version of the character, and audiences felt that realism. But here's a detail that changes how you see everything. In On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond falls in love and gets married, and his wife Tracy is killed shortly after. That emotional scar quietly echoes through later films. Even decades later, references appear, subtle lines,
musical callbacks,
visual parallels, suggesting that no matter how many soft reboots happen, the trauma follows him, which makes the ending of No Time to Die feel less like a shock
and more like a long-delayed reckoning. And now we're at a crossroads for the first time in modern history. There is no confirmed actor stepping into the tuxedo. No announced direction,
no clear blueprint. The producers have promised reinvention, but reinvention of what exactly?
The suave fantasy,
the broken assassin, the political symbol? Because every era of James Bond reflects the fears and fantasies of its time, and if the world has changed again, then Bond must change too. The only question is whether he evolves quietly or explodes into something no one sees coming. So now you see it. James Bond was never untouchable, not in casting, not in politics,
not in money,
not even in myth. He survived legal wars, studio bankruptcies, public backlash,
creative collapse, and finally,
he didn't survive at all, because for 60 years, Bond was designed to reset. New face, same code number, new mission,
same legend, but the moment he died on screen, something fundamental cracked. The illusion of immortality, and once that illusion breaks,
you can't fully rebuild it. So the real question isn't who plays Bond next. It's this: can you resurrect a myth after you've proven it complete? Can you sell eternity after showing mortality? Can 007 still feel invincible
now that we've watched him burn? Because maybe the most dangerous mission in Bond history isn't one he'll ever take. It's the one the franchise is facing right now, and this time,
there's no guarantee he walks away.